Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. And I thought I'd try something a little bit different today, so I brought on an expert alongside me to discuss a particular signing that Manchester City have made. Of course, we know we've signed a new goalkeeper, one that, if we're all being totally honest with ourselves, that not many were probably familiar with before Manchester City signed Stefan Ortega. And I didn't know how particularly good he was personally until I did a little bit of research, but not as much probably as the man alongside me. And this is John Harrison. John, welcome to the channel. How are you doing, mate? You okay?
Hey, yeah, I'm great. No, really glad to be on. Happy to speak some goalkeeping with you.
Yeah, exactly. I was a goalkeeper as a kid, actually. I was pretty decent, but never got quite as far as these guys. But anyway, John is from goalkeeper.com. And do you mind telling me a little bit what you do? Because you've gained a reputation now over on Twitter, which is how I know you personally, as essentially a bit of a goalkeeper expert. Do you mind explaining a little bit where that's come from?
Yeah, so I'm currently the head of data science at goalkeeper.com, and what we're basically doing there is building models to analyze goalkeeping, and also, as well as analyzing goalkeepers, basically educate goalkeepers on potentially optimum decisions they could make training strategies they should undertake, and things like that. So I sort of got into it a little bit randomly. So when I was finishing my PhD at Cambridge in astrophysics, I realized I didn't really want to be an astronomer forever. It wasn't something that was going to interest me. So I sort of thought, what else interests me? And my other love was football. So I
How
played
could you
football
not
all
be
my life.
interested in astronomy? Man? That's a hell of a astronomy and goalkeeper. Yeah, I guess you're used to looking at stars though, but
Yeah, no, indeed. So like the astronomy was really fun while I was doing it, but after like 8 years, PhD and all that, I got to the point where I was like, yeah, it's interesting, but what else is there that I could look at? I really enjoyed the stats and the maths of it, and I thought,
yeah.
well, goalkeeping is something I play in goal. I've played in goal all my life, and I thought that's something I think is missing a lot of the statistics. Like
You're right.
people, like they're still using clean sheets to do the Golden Glove, and they're still basing things on just goals conceded. So I thought, can we have a more scientific approach to that? And that sort of spearheads all the work that I'm doing at the moment. And then the analysis we'll talk about today, you'll see the sort of models we've built to try and gauge how important goalkeepers are to teams' defenses.
And of course, as well, I think it's fair to say the role of a modern goalkeeper is absolutely transformed. You know, obviously football's changed an awful lot over the past decade or two in particular, but I would say what goalkeepers these have to be these days is it's almost a complete revamp, especially for obviously a Manchester City side. And obviously the fundamentals are still similar, but it is changed as football has changed. So has goalkeepers, and I think you're right that maybe the focus and what a goalkeeper brings, statistically at the very least, it hasn't really moved on. So I'm fascinated as well, and I'm looking at you obviously Twitter right now, and you've grown quite a lot over there. How long ago did it start to take off for you personally?
So the first thing I did was the 2018 World Cup. I did some sort of freelance analysis of that, and yeah, back then I only had a few hundred followers on Twitter. But as you say, like I got picked up by different podcasts, different companies, did a little bit of article work for that and that. But I guess it really blew up. Probably the biggest increase of sort of following and notifications I got was when my stats were used on Monday Night Football. So
Oh,
Jamie
really?
Carragher used my stats when analysing Alisson's 1v1s. Yeah, no, indeed. Yeah, no, but yeah. But yeah, so basically Carragher wanted to see if there was any statistics that backed up Alisson being immense one-on-one this season, like completely different to other goalkeepers in other seasons. And yeah, it turned out I was like the only person who had that sort of data. So they phoned me up and got my data and used that. And then obviously once that was on Monday Night Football, I got a lot of people wanting to follow me and ask about the stuff we were doing.
That's amazing, man. Genuinely, like, it's entrepreneurial as well. I love that. You know, when you got to find your own niche and stuff, and it's something obviously you're passionate about, which is why I asked you. And thank you so much for coming on the channel, man. It's really, really appreciated. I want to talk to you a little bit about Stefan Ortega. Now, Manchester City, of course, have signed him. As I've said at the top of the video, he wasn't a name I was particularly familiar with. Not in an ignorance way. He's just more. You know, he was a relegation battling goalkeeper over in Germany, uncapped and so on. And he's had a relatively modest career, basically just two clubs prior to Man City, Arminia Bielefeld and 1860 Munich before that. And I have got in touch with you a few days ago, and you said obviously you needed a little bit of time to do research. What have you found personally? And of course, as well, there's some graphics. So let me know when you want to bring a graphic up on screen, mate, and we'll get them on. But what have you made so far of what you've seen of Stefan Ortega?
So I was actually very surprised. So I normally quickly scan the sort of very basic statistics first. So just stuff like the goals conceded, number of games that they played, where their team finished in the league, all that sort of stuff. And obviously, yeah, he got relegated in the Bundesliga. So I was thinking, this is a little bit of an interesting one. But then once I looked into the deep stats, so if you want, you can bring up that overall season performance graphic. But once I looked into that, I realised he had a hell of a season. I imagine they would have finished rock bottom without him. So when we ran him through the models. Yeah, indeed. When we ran through some of the models, if we start with the top one, with basically that's the sort of parameter for shot stopping. So the first one is general shot stopping. So this is a model that basically looks at the location of every shot, like where it was taken from, the build-up that led to it. So was it from a cutback, was it from a cross, and then the final location of the shot and its shot velocity. So I always use this example. If you've got a shot from 30 yards that's hit at 20 miles an hour down the middle, that's going to beat a pro keeper like one time in 1,000 maybe when it creeps through their legs. But if you've got a shot from 7 yards out in the top corner at 75 miles an hour, that's going to beat a pro keeper 95% of the time. So if you just rack that up over the season, you can sort of have a look at how someone's doing. So last season in the Bundesliga, Ortega saved his team about 3 goals above average versus what you'd expect an average top flight goalkeeper to do. So that's pretty solid. It's nothing like out of this world. So like goalkeepers who are renowned shot stoppers like 𝙏𝙬𝙨𝙧𝙖𝙬, or some keepers like Mendy maybe, they'll be on numbers of maybe +10, +8, +7 in this category. So that's the elite. But
is that the general shot stopping?
Just the general, exactly, just the general. So like some people can go super high in that. Obviously, others can go to like -10. I think one of Kepa's seasons at Chelsea was down there in general shot stopping for just not saving anything.
That was the same for Bravo as well for years, but I would not have been surprised. That 16-17 one, but like we move on from that. But that's decent. It's above average, isn't it?
Yeah. And we'll get on to Ederson later, but Ederson sort of just hovers around maybe +1 to -1 for the general category. Like that's not. We'll get to the area of shot stopping that Ederson normally excels at and discuss sort of what happened this year.
Because we'll go to Ederson later actually, because I think it's a good talking point, Ederson as well. And we have sent over some graphics about that, so we'll have a Ederson chat later. But now this looks encouraging for.
Really encouraging. So and then the next one, the 1v1 stopping. This was something that was crazy when I was watching it. He was just saving so many 1v1s. So in comparison to the Premier League, he would be second only to Alisson with that +6.08. So that basically means I think he faced roughly 50 one-on-ones and he saved about 6 more than he probably should have, which obviously 6 goals is huge, especially in a relegation battle when relegation teams probably are only scoring 20, 25 goals. So he was wonderful 1v1. And now if we're thinking about Man City's style of play, I did some research and presented at the StatsBomb conference about a year ago, saying that Liverpool and Man City concede the majority of their expected goals through 1v1s. No other team does that. Exactly. Because of the way both teams play, it's interesting because Man City and Liverpool play different styles, but it ends up the same in terms of
I get it.
When they get broken on, that's when they concede shots. They don't really concede that many shots that are teams building up against them and getting a shot from just inside the box or a header off a cross or something like that. It's normally one-on-ones on the break. So for Man City signing this goalkeeper, it seems very sensible to me because he's just come off like an unbelievable one-on-one stopping season. And we can get more on his 1v1s later, but we'll finish going through these. And then one thing that did strike me, if he is going to be a number 2, is I think he faced 7 penalties and conceded them all. Which obviously that can happen to any goalkeeper.
Yeah, of course,
But if it's your cup keeper, you potentially do want someone who's got a little bit of penalty stopping ability. So maybe that's a little bit of they had to settle on that. But as you can see, it only costs about 1 goal because keepers really only save about 15-20% of penalties if they're like average to decent. So it's hardly when De Gea conceded like 50 in a row. Conceding 7 in a row isn't the end of the world. But it's something to probably be aware of if he is going to be the cup keeper.
So you've got total goals prevented. So how does that compare as a stat to total goals stopped? Because obviously to me they look the same, in terms of they sound the same as a title. But what's the difference between them?
Indeed. So total goals prevented is to do with stopping shots from actually ever happening. So this looks at basically every cross, every through ball, and also every shot they face and if they spill it back out. So you can example, it's one of my sort of big bugbears in goalkeeping. People might disagree with me, but I really hate double saves. I think most double saves, there's some that are like worldies because the first save's great and it's there. but the majority of double saves is actually just a bad mistake, and you're bailing yourself out. So when I was building these models, the first one in terms of, well, the bottom one in terms of shot handling.
Is it like the equivalent of your second touch is a tackle kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like,
exactly.
Good tackle, but you shouldn't have happened. Yeah.
So an example of this that I like to use is if a shot goes like straight down the middle and you scoop it out to a striker one-on-one, then you go out and save the one-on-one. Yes, a shot stopping model should say that was a great one-on-one save, but you need to be penalised somewhere, because if the keeper just scoops up that first one and catches it, he's getting less, like the model's not rating him as highly as the one who's throwing it back to the striker to then save the rebound. So this shot handling basically looks at every shot they face, and if an average keeper would have caught it, parried it into danger, parried it out for a corner, etc., and builds like an expected goals number off it. So actually, this is an area where Ortega was actually quite weak last season. So quite a few, I think it only cost him 1 goal, but my model predicts it should have cost him about maybe 1.5, 2 goals. Maybe.
And I guess that's down to poor finishing then at the other end.
Yes, exactly. So it's down to basically poor finishing. So, but once he did just parry it straight back to a striker who tapped in a simple one, and that was a shot that was down. It was just a handling error. It's like shot down the middle. He just spilled it and gave away a rebound. But over the course of the season, he did quite frequently parry the ball back into dangerous areas, and they didn't always get punished. But that might be something to look out for City's handling. And
how does that compare to other keepers? Like, is there any keepers that have a similar level? Like, in my head, De Gea parries a lot. Is that right? Like, De Gea seems to be a guy who parries a lot of shot at.
De Gea this year, I think, was about average on my model. So the thing about De Gea is, while he does occasionally get parries really wrong, his use of his feet is actually really good for this. Because you can imagine sometimes if a shot is in the sort of foot save range for De Gea, if he gets a boot on that and clears it out for a throw-in, that's amazing. Like throw-ins result in goals like 1 in 100 times. Whereas you can imagine another goalkeeper might go with their hands and end up scooping it back out for a 1v1, which might go in 50% of the time.
Yeah, of course.
So De Gea's numbers are normally pretty solid on this. The best keeper in the Premier League actually last season was Mendy in terms of handling, which I guess is kind of an interesting one. I guess handling is not something people often talk about, but Mendy's ability, it might be through his size and his agility, but Mendy's ability to parry it out for corners was like ridiculous. Like he very rarely even parried it safe back into play. It was just everything went out for a corner, which is for a lot of things really useful.
Extra 4 or 5 inches on other goalkeepers will help there, isn't it? Because if you're not fully extended, you've got more control of where the ball's going to go, I guess, haven't you? So you're like that, you're just getting your fingers to it. If you're a bit taller, you're getting your whole palm to it, so you can move it away. So I guess is that where maybe his height helps a little bit potentially for Mendy?
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And I imagine there's a lot of decision making as well. I imagine he's also making really good decisions of when to catch and when to parry. Because actually at the top level, the majority of the sort of handling mistakes you see are actually the keeper's just gone for the wrong thing. So he's tried to catch it when really he should be parrying it, or he's tried to parry it out the left side and actually he should have tried to push it the other way. So there'll be some physical attributes in there, but also some mental attributes from Mendy, some good decision making that helps in there. But
his sweeping looks good based off the stats.
Yes, so no, that is very fair.
City, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So he saved his team about a goal through sweeping up extra through balls and dealing with those through balls better than other keepers. So if we go back to what the model sees, it sort of looks at every through ball and calculates, would an average keeper have come for that? And then if an average keeper came for it, how would they deal with it? So it might be they just boot it up the other end of the field. Or it might be, no, they sweep it up, take it and play a simple pass to the fullback so their team retains possession. So it's a nice way of sort of breaking down, one, what was the quality of the chance they stopped? So like sweeping up, like it might be a through ball right on the edge of the box, it's a clear one-on-one, keeper clears it, that's basically stopped a 40% chance of a goal. Or it might be the model will account for defenders running. So let's say it's getting tracked by Ruben Diaz is tracking the player, Ederson comes out and sweeps. But if he hadn't have come out and swept, the model knows there's a defender in the way, so it would potentially only be a goal 5% of the time, let's say.
Yeah.
So that's how the mod does it, and yeah, he came out of that well. He's not like an elite sweeper, as we'll get onto when we talk about goalkeepers like Ederson and Alisson. They're saving 2 or 3 goals a season from their sweeping because just how much they do. But it's definitely a good sign that it's above average.
At least. Yeah, so that's impressive. So we talked a little bit about his shot handling, his cross claiming there. So you've got total goals distributed, which obviously that's a stat that will interest the Man City fans for very obvious reasons. Distribution is a huge part of what Ederson is expected to do, and before that, Bravo, and then of course backup keepers, like 𝐿𝐴 have been asked to do it to varying degrees of success. He looks, I mean, maybe I'm interpreting naively, it looks relatively decent again, here.
No, really good. So one thing that struck me when watching him is his quick distribution after he's made a save is excellent. So the way he can like sidewind the ball and throw the ball to set up attacks was actually very reminiscent of Ederson. I imagine this is the main reason they've signed him, because his passing was one of the best I've sort of analysed and looked at this season. So it makes a lot of sense that it especially his longer passing. Like a lot of keepers under pressure, he does worry me a little bit. So I think he gave it away like 3 or 4 times in his own half. None of them cost a goal, but he had to make 2 big saves. So it's like, again, it was sort of stat padding his save stats a little bit by poor passing. But his longer distribution, like the Ederson style, they've pushed up to the halfway line and you just ping it 80 yards and suddenly, what was it? Yeah, it's the goal. Was it against Real Madrid? Just launch at the full length, you're in behind, cross goal. That sort of stuff that really only Ederson can do. I saw a little bit of that from him. He doesn't quite have the range of Ederson, but no goalkeeper does.
Ederson feels... is it fair to say Ederson is unique in that aspect? He feels to me like he is, because the accuracy and the pace of those pings as well, the distance, that feels quite unique to his game.
The one against Huddersfield, where he just takes a quick goal kick, he only has to take 2 steps as well, which is crazy. And he can just launch it the full... Because you can't be offside from a goal kick, and he just launched it the full length of the field. Aguero's in, dinks it over the Huddersfield keeper. It was like outrageous. And I remember Tottenham once against Man City tried to play really high, and Ederson was just like, chill, and he just kept every time he just kept putting Sterling.
I think Gundogan, was it? This was one where Gundogan sat down. Who was it? Davinson Sanchez, was it maybe?
Davinson Sanchez, that was the other Tottenham game as well. I was thinking about a really old school one where I think it was Pochettino tried to, when Man City first started properly just playing out from the back, and I don't think you could go in the box at the time. I don't think the defenders could go in the box. So he was like, get Dele Alli and Kane to press. And then Ederson just killed them. He's pretty unique in that. But Stefan Ortega was not a million miles off. So I'm pretty sure that'll be one of the main reasons City scouted him.
I didn't ask you to do this, so apologies in advance, but I'm just wondering if you have any idea of how Ortega compares to Stefan. Have you got any thoughts on that at all?
So I've had a look. I'm pretty confident that he's a big upgrade on Stefan. I don't know that much about Stefan's distribution skills. I know roughly how he's sort of perceived in America, and his sort of at the moment his battle with Turner to be the USA #1 goalkeeper. But I think this season was very impressive. It's hard with goalkeepers with one season to know exactly if they can keep that up, especially going from the Bundesliga to the Premier League. But for me, I'm confident, especially in shot stopping, he's an upgrade on Stefan, and I'm pretty sure his distribution is as well. Like if he could do it for a relegation,
that is to talk for Stefan versus Stefan. That's my favorite. Zach Stefan,
Stefan versus Ortega.
That's better. But I mean, the one thing that stood out for Zach Stefan is he's obviously a good keeper. He obviously is, But the question mark, I think it didn't help, but he had a couple of mistakes in cup competitions last season with his distribution, and I think there's an element of if you are trying your best to do something, it doesn't come naturally, and then you make that mistake, it's gonna stick with you. And there's almost too fragile confidence, to play a way that is not natural to him, and then to do it regularly. I think it doesn't mean he can't do it. It's just it's so precariously balanced, that his confidence in that scenario.
And also he's doing it with the best goalkeeper in the world as the backup. So I guess there's a tendency to overthink things. Like he might be like, Ederson would have done this. This is what Diaz is expecting. This is what Walker's expecting. This is what the people are expecting, and tries to potentially play outside of his limits. One thing that sort of Ben Foster always says on his channel and when he's doing interviews and stuff is he found it so much easier when the managers just give him his limits and just let him play in that, and he'll play better because he won't overthink anything. So I think it is a big thing for goalkeepers if you have the trust from the manager to know whatever your decision is, we're happy with it. And I guess when you're trying to make the decisions Ederson makes and the crazy passes and stuff he does and the confidence he has, it can just mean you're thinking an extra second. And if you do that quite often, you can get punished.
Did you see any signs when you were doing your research on how he will react to that? Because obviously the amount of times you see the ball back from Walker down to Ederson, who's basically on his line at this point, and then he'll play it only like 20-degree angle from the touchline to Cancelo or something like that, or then he'll break about the forward line and go straight through to, I don't know, De Bruyne on the turn. Was there any signs of that from Stefan Ortega when you were doing a little bit of research?
So he didn't face, like, the fraction of passes under pressure was not as high as a goalkeeper like Ederson, but when he was playing under pressure, as you can see from the model, plus 0.39, he looked quite comfortable. As I said, there was a few, that number could have been higher if it wasn't for a few of those stray passes going to opposition wingers and centre mids. But he looks quite comfortable, but I think it's very difficult taking someone who's doing it in the Bundesliga with their style of pressing versus what's going to happen in the Premiership when Man City have a very fixed way, because I imagine he won't be allowed to go as long as often. When under pressure, he'll be expected to know you've got to play between the centre forwards, you've got to play through the fullbacks, you've got to do all of this stuff that he might have had a get out of jail or just boot it out clause in the Bundesliga, but he won't have that anymore.
So you sent another graphic over to me about his one-on-ones faced, one versus ones, which I brought up on screen right now, which you can't see, by the way, but it'll be on the edit and all that kind of stuff. So do you want to talk us through this a little bit? Because once again, there's a lot of pluses there, which I like. The pluses look positive.
Yeah, no, indeed. So just a quick overview of what this graphic is. Firstly, it's obviously a map of the pitch, and there's mainly sort of three different types of points on this. So there's circles, which means it's a 1v1 situation where the goalkeeper just stood on his line, basically, and what I call wait and react. So it's like, go on then, what are you going to do? Are you going to beat me? I'm going to wait here. If you take another touch, I might rush out. But at the moment, I'm happy to just stay here and stay big. The star points are what people call the spread technique. So that's, he rushes out at the attacker and he basically puts his arms out wide, puts his legs out wide, a little bit like Peter Schmeichel, 𝐿𝐴 Schmeichel, Manuel Neuer, that sort of typical technique of split the legs, split the arms, attack the ball. And then the triangle points are diving on the ball with your hands. So rushing out and basically trying to smother the ball.
Engage and smother,
Indeed, engage and smother. And then he never used the engage and block technique, which is a sort of David De Gea cricket long barrier style thing where you go down on one knee and do that. It wasn't a technique he used. And then the other one's engage and react, which is the diamond point. Again, he used it very rarely, but that's you rush out and you sort of jockey them. So you rush out, but you don't form any sort of barrier or try and attack the ball. You just try and then jockey them and see what you can do. And interestingly, as a quick summary of the research I've found, so I've analysed, I think, about 4,000 1v1s now over the Premier League and the techniques goalkeepers have used. And I've figured out what the optimum technique to do is in certain situations. So you can see that sort of dotted line, dotted arc, I guess, around the box at about 14 yards out. And what that is the optimum technique outside of that is to wait and react. So to stay deep on your line and not rush out. Because if you rush out, you'll end up giving away, getting chipped, getting rounded because there's so much space in behind you. And also, it does make sense from a physics point of view. If someone was doing a shooting drill at the edge of the box, you can just stay on your line and try and save it. They're very rarely going to beat you, right? Whereas if you then stood on the penalty spot when they're on the edge of the box, it's going to be much harder because there's so much space around you for them to curl it or put it over you. Vice versa. Once you're inside that arc, if I was just stood on my line and someone took a shot from 10 yards away, there's no way I'm saving it. They could roll it in the corner and it'd still be difficult for me to save it. In that zone, that's where you have to rush out because there's no reaction time anymore. And actually, there's very little space in behind you. So if they do try and round you, they'll probably dribble it out of play. And if they do try and chip you, it'll probably go over the bar. So in that sort of closer zone, the optimum thing is to rush out and attack the ball and basically make yourself as big as possible. And I say it in inverted commas, but hope the ball hits you. It's not really hoping because you're getting so close to it that you're filling the whole goal. But that's the rough strategy that my model comes out with. And there's a nuance that we'll get to with Stefan Ortega. But it actually thinks that at narrow angles, using the David De Gea style block, the quick long barrier is the best thing to do because it means the ball can't go through your legs. And in the middle part, it wants the spread. It wants you to do the full Manuel Neuer spread, the star points. So you can see Stefan Ortega's points, if we get to him now, in that sort of close zone in the middle band is extremely good. So he basically always uses the star. There's one circle in there, but the rest are stars. The white points are saves and the red points are goals. So you can see he faced 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He faced 8 1v1s in that zone and amazingly, saved 6 of them. So the XG of 1v1s in that area is like going in more than 60% of the time, and he's saving 6 out of 8. So
he's
it's not
phenomenal,
luck.
basically, in one-on-one.
Exactly. And it's not luck because he's using the optimum strategy. Interesting part
we go back as well, to interrupt. Sorry, go back to what you said earlier. How the key goal, well, the type of chance Man City usually concede to is a one-on-one. So it's almost like he's essentially optimal at the kind of thing that Manchester City concede.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I would say, and this is crazy, so he's saved them, as we discussed earlier, about 6 goals above average because of how good he is at 1v1s. But he could improve even further. Because if you look at those sort of in the close, so inside the arc, but in the wide channels, you can see it's all basically stars again. But you can see it's almost 50-50 now. Like half of them are going in and half of them are being saved. And that's actually what I would expect from basically a normal keeper using the spread every time at those angles, whereas the block in those areas saves at about a 75-80% rate. And that's just because you can imagine this. If I'm stood in goal and you're at a tight angle and I rush out, the majority of the goal is actually between my legs because the angle's tight now. So
people don't really raise their shots to the roof of the net from that angle, do they? As much as you think they would do. Most people at that point, they get close, they just place
go through the keeper.
Yeah, the rare player like Aguero, for example, he was rare because he would go right up to the roof of the net. But that is just not common, is it? That most people don't have the it's almost like a composure level for strikers to know that. When there was almost like goalkeepers should know that they're not going to do that. And I guess I can see why. I mean, De Gea obviously is the one that springs to mind. Is anyone else particularly good at that you're aware of?
Yeah, so Matty Ryan is really good at it. Robert Sanchez as well. Maybe it's the Brighton goalkeeper coach getting them all to do it. But Matty Ryan, Robert Sanchez are really good at it. And so actually 𝙤𝙬𝙨 this season has been pretty good at using the block. And other keepers sort of use it sporadically. There's a few English keepers that occasionally use it, like Henderson and Ramsdale, but not always. But yeah, there's a lot of keepers that are good at the block, and it makes sense because at these tight angles, the only way really through you is like you say, either chipping you or going through your legs. And actually, the block, you sort of stand up a little bit higher and you stop them megging you. So over the spread, where you can end up diving at the player, it offers that benefit. And like I say, the spread's still a good solution there. It's better than waiting on your line, but there's a potential improvement in his technique if you can take the block on board, and he could boost the numbers even more. The one thing I do want to say...
Does he use the block a lot, particularly? I'm looking around, I don't see many engagement.
No, he actually didn't use it once last season. But the good thing is, it's much easier to learn the block than the spread. So I've been chatting to a goalkeeper coach and people like that, and often I'm saying the spread is so good at saving close range 1v1s in between the posts. Like, it's so much better than any other technique. We need goalkeepers to be able to do it. And they often say to me, it's really hard, especially for older goalkeepers, to do it because of the sort of splits in the legs. They don't have the mobility. And that's super interesting. But the block is just dropping down into a cricket long barrier. Like, anyone can do that. Like, it doesn't really involve as much actual, I guess, athletic and gymnastic, skill. So it's something he could definitely easily pick up. And like I say, he didn't do any. The one thing that I would highlight there is the amount of circles. Now, if we go to what I call long range 1v1s, which Man City fans probably hate because it's basically Ederson's area of weakness. And you can think back to the Champions League final goal and the goal we conceded in the Copa America. And against, I think it was Tottenham in one of the Champions League legs, Son scored a few from like outside the box one-on-ones where Ederson like came out and gambled. So it's something Ederson really struggles with. But Ortega was excellent, at least last season. So you can see sometimes he does rush out, and he's conceded a few goals.
Sorry, what we're looking at here, sorry.
So we're looking at anything outside of the arc. So all the points outside the arc where the model suggests the optimum strategy is to wait, and if they shoot from there, save it as normal. If they take another touch, now you rush out. So it's basically the sort of, can you be calm and hold your position? A really good goalkeeper at this, an example, is Alisson. If you watch his 1v1 saves from last season, like a compilation of them, he's so good at someone's running in and he's like, no, I'm in my 6-yard box. I'm chilling. I'm going to react if they shoot. And then as soon as they take the touch that'll bring them close, that's when I go. So it's all about being patient and not going too soon. So these are situations where they haven't taken an extra touch and they've just shot from this long range situation. And it's what he does. And you can see there's loads of white circles, which means he waited on his line and he made the save. There's a few, you can see, I think there's about 6 or 7 where he did rush out. And again, it's 50-50 whether they go in or not. Whereas you can see with the white points, it's much higher. It's like 90% of the time he's saving it if he does wait. So this is a really good sign for Man City. And potentially it will help Ederson improve. playing with Ortega and training with Ortega.
The stars are so evenly spread outside the arc, whereas the circles, which I guess is the wait and react thing, they are much more. Well, they're all white, aren't they? The circles, I think.
Yeah.
Outside the arc. That's interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So long range plus 2 and overall performance. So essentially, does overall performance include long range and close range?
It's basically just those two added together.
Two.
It's just that.
So. He did. Well, I know they got relegated, but he did his bit basically, didn't he? By the looks of it, Ortega. He did more than his bit.
He had a hell of a season,
and it looks like a really smart signing, basically. Genuinely, a really intelligent signing because, as you said, he's optimised for the weaknesses that Manchester City have. So I'll be interested to see how he goes. And obviously, I watched the interview. And he seems a really confident, very humble man as well, which is good. And I'm fascinated to see how this goes. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Ederson though, because Ederson. I think it's fair to say he didn't have his best season at Manchester City. I think Ederson's a very good goalkeeper, but I think it's fair to say that last season was a little bit lower than his standards. And I think it's interesting to talk about how he's performed in your eyes statistically. So I brought up this graphic now for his Premier League performance from last season and his overall value and so on, blah blah blah. Do you want to talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so
I as well, by the way. So feel free to
exactly.
Jump through a little bit. Yeah,
I can rattle through it, but Ederson, I completely agree with you. I think he probably had his worst season, at least in the Premier League, for City to date. In terms, especially on the statistics of what he gave them. So we can see here, he was worth about 4 goals above average. So that does mean you can't just put an average keeper in City's goal. They'll concede 4 more goals. But his levels
does
normally...
that mean, by the way, fundamentally, he's above average?
Yeah. Fundamentally, overall, you couldn't just put, Alex McCarthy or something.
Yeah, which is a quick answer to people who think he's not very good. Football fans are very tribal, and they see a mistake and they presume he's just an average goalkeeper. But this shows by your stats he's above average. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. For the top flight leagues, you couldn't just put in willy-nilly a mid-table goalkeeper in Man City. They'd concede more goals, basically. 4 more goals. And Ederson usually, if we before we go through these ones, if we sort of roughly describe his profile in the models over the last few years, he's basically an average shot stopper. He'll be fluttering around 0 for general shot stopping. That's not what he really does. He's not costing City goals, but he's not saving them loads extra.
Anyone else around that level in general? Anyone that we know?
It would just be the sort of mid-table goalkeepers like Alex McCarthy springs to mind, Fraser Forster. Let me think some other ones. Often. For general shot stopping, just really keep us in the mid-table. He's Premier League level.
Not an elite shot stopper.
He's not costing loads of goals like Kepa or Joe Hart in the latter part of his career.
Right, so you behave with Joe Hart. I love that man.
No.
I agree.
I'm a Birmingham City fan, so Joe Hart's one of my heroes. So that loads
Joe Hart,
was
by the way,
outrageous.
he was phenomenal with his shot stopping.
Indeed, especially 1v1s. Joe Hart 1v1s was unbelievable.
He was a spread keeper, wasn't he? He was a spread keeper.
He was a big spread goalkeeper.
Very good at that as well.
Really good. And the game against Barca is like an exhibition in 1v1s.
Is that like a masterclass of how to stop?
Yeah,
shot stop.
Yeah.
Even Messi was impressed with that. I mean, I love Joe. I absolutely love him. What a guy.
But
so back to the stats then.
But 1v1s, he's normally like +3 or 4 every season. Like he's normally pretty good. We'll get onto his 1v1 graphic in a second, but it is quite a dichotomy. He's usually like +5.
You can go to it now if you want to, by the way. Do you want to go to the
we can pop to that and then pop back to the.
We'll go over to that now. So I've put it up on screen now. So there we go.
Yeah. So this is Ederson's 1v1s this year. Yeah. This is quite uncharacteristic. So usually, I think over the last 4 years in my model, he's consistently about +4 or 5 maybe in close range each season, but then he's usually -2 or 1 or 2 in long range. That's his sort of profile. So he averages out about +3 overall. +2, +3 overall. Yeah. That's his usual. So his 1v1 level dropped off.
His reflexes, wasn't he? He was known for his close range stopping.
No, and he's usually very good at that. But this is the sort of part of this season where he's dropped off a bit. So to be honest, it does look like a lot of red, but actually -0.5 basically means if he'd have made 1 more save, he'd have been +0.5. So for me, it's still average. Like I only really care about +1s, 2s, 3s and -1s, 2s, 3s. Like if you're still within a goal, it means like footballs are like all these things like they're decimals, but football's measured in single goals. You can't score half a goal. So for me, his stats basically show he was average at 1v1s last season, but obviously Man City. the way they play and their style, they don't want a keeper who's average at 1v1s. They want a keeper who's exceptional at 1v1s because that will really help.
It's our weakness, essentially, yeah.
Exactly.
As a team.
It will really help.
Go back to Ortega as a reference, he was +6, which is, I'm guessing it's an element as well that Ortega probably faces more 1-on-1s. Is that fair?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I just looked, 53 faced versus 31, so it's a substantial amount more. And have you noticed any statistical, sorry to interrupt you, mate, but have you noticed any statistical thing where if someone faces more, they're more like is there anything to do with that, like the numeric of it?
So if they face more, they're more likely to overperform. So a keeper, it can be roughly said that their like percentage is pretty constant. So Alisson basically always saves about 5% more 1v1s than he should, whereas another keeper, sorry to keep beating on 𝐿𝐴𝐻, but he's the person in my model who I can remember always being bottom. But 𝐿𝐴𝐻 will concede about 5% more 1v1s. So obviously, if he faces 100 1v1s, he'll concede 5 goals over. Whereas if he only faces 50, he'll only concede about 2.5 over.
Yeah.
So yeah, indeed, by facing twice as many 1v1s, if we were going to map Ortega's performance onto Ederson's, we'd probably say he probably would only be worth about 3 goals. He wouldn't be worth the full 6 because Man City next season are not going to concede 53 1-on-1s. They'll concede less than, so they normally, 31 is pretty par for Man City, basically just under 1 a game, because some games they'll concede 2 or 3. And we can get to that with some actual examples.
Everybody's playing, we'll concede about 5. So
and then against Tottenham normally as well. So like if we actually dig into the data now, if we dig into the data, if we start with the close range ones, that's inside the arc, we can see in the mid, like he's making some good decisions in the middle, but also some weird ones. So we have the sort of 3 stars. He saved 2, conceded 1. One of those was that amazing save against Kane, which annoyingly for City, I guess, didn't count for anything because they went and scored later. But the 1v1 with Kane got in, huge spread, great save. The model loves it. The model basically, if you look at it, it thinks that goes in about, I think it's something like 70% of the time. But when he used the spread, that instantly drops to about 40% of the time. Like the technique a keeper uses can change the goal probability that much. And then obviously he did save it. So it was great decision and great execution. But his sort of problem was he wasn't always doing that. He was doing other things. So he had these 2 right on the edge where they're triangles and they just indicate the direction he dove at, and he tried to dive and attack the ball. And I think he ended up getting rounded or the ball put over him in these situations. It's nowhere near like Ortega's. Ortega looks like he's got a strategy. It's wait, and then when I'm not waiting, I just rush out and spread. Whereas Ederson's is a little bit more, I'll do what I feel like, which does have its flaws. Which does have its flaws in terms of there are some strategies that are more optimal. And he sort of seems to, go with whatever. But one point I want to highlight is there was a Kane goal where I think Son crossed it in. It was still a 1v1 because it wasn't like a cross and a header. It was like lobbed forwards over the defence, and that's the red circle. He just waited on his line. Kane smashed it in. That's one of those things where it looks like an impossible goal to save. But if you watch what Ortega was doing, he'd have rushed out and spread, and maybe it hits him in the face. Maybe it hits him in the chest. He might get something on it. That's one of those that really shows you can't just wait forever. If you end up staying on your line for close range 1v1s, you're very, very rarely gonna make a save.
So we've talked a little bit about how he waited too long, and sometimes he doesn't wait enough. So is it
yes?
As you look like outside that arc area, there's a lot of red there.
Yeah, and it could have been worse. So there's that. The furthest diamond out is the Lukaku save. That's the one where Lukaku ran in 1-1. He sort of just rushed out, jockeyed him a bit. Lukaku shot and he saved it. But the thing is, my model thinks actually that was a chance that only goes in about 15% of the time, and he made it a 50-50 because if Lukaku chips it, it's a goal. But Lukaku didn't try and lift it; he just tried to smash it in. So he's actually potentially got away with one. In there, also we've got Bowen's goal at the end, and we've got all those stars. I think one of them's so this is the interesting about the 1v1 model. It doesn't need to be a shot. If he gets rounded, it counts at the point he got rounded. And also if he gets passed round, it counts there. So I think the furthest left outside the arc, red star, is the goal against Tottenham. So Son runs in 1-on-1. He comes out and spreads. Son just squares it, and it gets tapped in by, I don't know, 𝐿𝐴𝐻 maybe? I don't know who scored. But so it includes all of that sort of stuff. And like you say, Ederson's problem last year was, uncharacteristically, he was waiting a little bit too much when the ball was close range, and not uncharacteristically, rushing too much when it was long range. So it looks like he had a little bit of a decision problem, and that's where he ended up being average, because his actual technique and his reflexes and whatever are above average. But it was his decision making that was killing him a bit last year. And while usually he's amazing close range because he just rushes and always rushes and gets there, last season it didn't really happen for him. It wasn't quite as brave.
And is that generally the trend? Because there's a narrative going around. It's mainly kids on Twitter who are probably overreacting a little bit to recency bias and so on. But in my head, he was better than last season, but before the last season. You know, like in my head, he used to be a little bit better, and I feel like he stood out a little bit more last season than he usually does. And when a keeper stands out, it's because things probably aren't going very well or going really well. So is it fair to say that his usual standard is much higher than it was last season?
Yeah, no, definitely, especially with 1v1s. If we're sticking on 1v1s, like I say, usually he's +3 goals-ish overall. And that includes the fact he'll be -1, -2 for long range. His close range stoppings usually the best in the league for the past few seasons, before the last one. He was normally up there being like, because I remember I used to call him like the king of close range 1v1 stopping. And
that's even with De Gea existing as well, who's obviously very good.
Exactly. So yeah, if we don't want to do a comparison to De Gea's long range 1v1s are really good because he loves staying on his line, as everyone all the memes whatever. But in those situations, staying on your line is the best thing to do. So he's really good at it. But close range 1v1s is interesting for De Gea because in that 17-18 season he was really good, but ever since then I think in that season he was maybe plus a few goals close range in my model, and every season since then he's been just dropping and getting more negative at close range 1v1s. Like I think this season, the last season we had, he might be like -2 or 3. And it's something my United fans are always talking to me about because they think that, basically De Gea's got far less brave and he sort of backs out and twists his body away and doesn't end up saving many close range 1v1s anymore. And it's true, if you look through the stats and stuff, his numbers have absolutely dropped off due to backing out. And I don't think that's Ederson's problem. I think Ederson's problem this year was a decision making. He was waiting too deep, not rushing out enough. And when he rushed out, he didn't quite use the right technique. But it'll be interesting to see next season if Ortega will help him out, having clearly such a, like you said, set strategy. Will that in training, he see that and maybe think, oh, do I need a much more set strategy, or do I just rush out and do what I feel like?
And you got to bear in mind as well, like Ederson, Ortega's literally older than him, only by a year or so. But he's not so old that he's not his peer. You know what I mean? Like Scott Carson and people like even Bravo. So they're obviously old man keepers compared to him. And I think it's probably fair to say that Stefan wasn't really seen as someone who could challenge him because his distribution wasn't good enough. And maybe there's a comfortability factor. I don't know. And obviously, once again, the people. People have bad seasons, bad moments, whatever. They lose the confidence a little bit. But it'd be interesting to see because Ortega's coming in as a guy who's got nothing to lose. He's coming into a Manchester City side where the expectation is so low, not in a bad way, just he's a backup keeper, and which comes with it. And once again, he's a good age. He's not your 35-year-old backup goalkeeper. He's 29 years old. And yeah, maybe it'll be interesting to see how Ederson reacts to this guy who, in his interview at very least, looks very confident, very confident and very bullish and so on. And I do wonder if he will learn from him because if he's as good as the stats show he is on the pitch, I'm sure he's as good in training. And it'd be interesting to see if the goalkeeper coaches go, Eddie, Stefan's really good at that. Maybe you should pay attention to that as well. And that'd be interesting to see that because people do change, don't they? They can improve and so on. And I think it's probably fair to say Ederson's probably aware, of his performances this season compared to last. Yeah. So let's go back to the overall graphics there. Yeah. So that detour away from the 1-1 stopping. So back to, total goal stopped, just under 1 there, total goal stopped. Yeah.
So he's basically cost them a goal, whereas in usual seasons, because of his 1v1 numbers, he would usually maybe be on +3. So that's quite a swing, like you said. So that's like 4 goals different than he would normally be his normal level. So yeah, he definitely had a worse season than usual, but obviously not disastrous. If we're talking about people saying Ederson's awful at stopping shots, it's not true. He's cost them a goal more than average. He's hardly like a sieve. But yeah, that's that. But then goals prevented, this is what he's wonderful at. And this, I don't think we mentioned it for Ortega, but Ortega's worst statistic was his crosses. He was actually -3 goals for cross claiming. And I think if you look at like Europe's top leagues, he comes for crosses very, very infrequently. And this is what is piling that number. So that number is... Ortega. Yeah, and this is Ortega. That number minus 3.21 for Ortega is basically not driven by coming for crosses, dropping them and someone tapping them in, which it could be, because the model takes into account that if you punch it straight to an opposition player, that's really bad. It also takes into account if you just don't come for any crosses, therefore you concede more shots, it takes that into account. And so basically it thinks that he faced about 3 more expected goals for not coming from crosses. Whereas if you look at Ederson, back to Ederson, cross-claiming was solid, above average, basically saved him a goal. And actually, interestingly, again, this is an area where he dropped off. He's usually at the sort of 2s and 3s potentially for cross-claiming. So I don't know if that was a thing City fans noticed, if he was coming for less crosses than usual. But the model had him as...
I don't know how this would get into it, but Manchester City defensively, we were unbelievably good at set pieces, and I don't know how much that would play into it, but I don't know if it'd be a case of that he has less of it to do, or I guess you're not sure if your numbers would have anything to do with that, but the City defensively were phenomenal. Set pieces and so on. We scored the most goals. I think we conceded like 1 for a set piece all season, or something stupid like that. So I don't know if it was his game didn't require it. I don't know if that would...
Yeah, no, to be fair, City faced very, very few crosses this season. So like the model does take into account, if you only face 10 crosses, it's not going to penalise you for not coming for any. And especially if those 10 crosses weren't right into the 6-yard box. It takes into account all the trajectory and how likely you are to intercept it and all that sort of fun stuff. But yeah, you're definitely right. Like if he faced 1,000 crosses, I expect that number would be higher because he just had more opportunity to claim. But it was an interesting thing that in past seasons he usually claims a little bit more than that. But it will be interesting to see, did City concede far fewer crosses this year than they did last year? I'm not 100% sure, but if so, that could explain at least part of it.
So he's free ball sweeping. How does that compare to his usual standards?
Yeah, that exactly as usual. Excellent. Yeah, 2.5 goals saved. I think it was him and Alisson are in the sort of mid 2+ goals saved through ball sweeping. Another sort of excellent season for him in terms of that. And I think, most City fans will know, sort of time and time again, when there's a through ball, he can get there, nick just before the striker, clear it. He very rarely actually gets that wrong. It's normally the 1v1s. It's normally when the striker's taking a touch and is dribbling at him that he rushes too soon. He's normally very good at judging, will I get there first? Yes, I'm going, I'm sliding, I'm smashing it into Rosette. So yeah, no, that's absolutely excellent. And like we said with Ortega, his numbers were good, not quite Ederson good. So it'll be interesting to see if he can adapt, especially
plus 1.34 there, by looks of it. So
and they faced a similar amount of through balls. For context, I checked between both of them. And we probably could say this at the end. So Ederson's overall value in goals, we'll go through his distribution and stuff in a second, but is about 4 goals to City. Ortega's overall was basically like 7.5 goals. But actually, if you scale it down, so I sort of ran a simulation where I made Ortega face all the shots, crosses, through balls Ederson did, which are obviously lesser. And he came out as about plus 4.5, 5. So he would have had, according to the model, obviously it's very hard to say because psychologically that plays like you can't always reproduce your form for a Bundesliga club fighting relegation for Man City battling for the title.
It's so different, isn't it?
If you could teleport him in.
Fernandinho's documentary last night, which a friend of mine made actually, but and they were talking, and Ederson was talking, which I think is interesting because he said the games that are tough for him obviously it's the games when he's doing nothing. He said it's so hard. He said it's more tiring to stand there doing nothing than it is to be facing loads of shots. And I get that actually, to be fair, because of it, like you're standing there doing nothing. It's more tiring than standing there running around sometimes because the mental focus and drain of that, I can imagine, is something that, for example, Stefan Ortega doesn't ever have to deal with, ever. Very rarely, because
been getting peppered every single game. So it's hard to translate. But if it did translate, he would have had a better goal than Ederson, but a better season than Ederson by about a goal. But
the fact that it's essentially, if not better, very close, is really interesting. So that's obviously
definitely.
There's a lot of quality there.
Yeah. So if we want to go to distribution, Ederson's the best in the Premier League by like a long way. So even though he doesn't get the ball that much, so this is an interesting thing. Like because of City's possession, he doesn't actually have the opportunity to distribute too much. So if we compared the two numbers, like Ortega's actually got higher scores in. He doesn't have a higher score in passing under pressure, but he does have a higher score in general passing. But that's more that he's attempted, I think, something like 1.5 times more passes than Ederson. So you'd expect that he has more opportunity. But if we're just looking at sort of a number I sometimes like to use is goals added per pass. So you can sort of see of how many times they've got the ball, how often do they increase the probability of scoring. And Ederson's just excellent at that because he very rarely gives it away in a dangerous area. And some of his passes over the top are setting up 1v1 chances that have like 30-40% chance of going in. One thing I did notice about Ederson this season is actually those numbers aren't quite, his general passing isn't quite as high as it sometimes is. So I think he didn't play as many of those really long balls that cut teams in half. But other than that,
I wonder that it's often
numbers.
because of the players that we've been playing. You know, we obviously no striker these days, and often Sterling wasn't in the team, and Sterling was the pacey one who got on that. So if you're playing long balls to Phil Foden as the false nine, or I don't know, Mahrez, who's not exactly a pacey player out wide, you're just probably not going to do it as much, are you? I guess, and there's an element of because they wouldn't get onto it. And I guess it's going to be interesting with Haaland there because Haaland is the exact kind of person you want to put. A lightning quick 6'5", and I guess that'll be interesting to see how it affects his game next season. Passing under pressure, decent as well. How does it compare to other people?
That's the best in the league. Like you don't face that many passes under pressure, so plus 0.4 obviously sounds like not a lot, but given the amount of passes goalkeepers face under pressure, that's a really, really good score. So an interesting bit of research I did was actually when a goalkeeper gets a pass under pressure in their own 6-yard box, the opposition is more likely to score next than they are. I guess it makes sense, but it's something like the average sort of expected goals of that situation is like it's like negative 2 in 100. It's like 1 in 50 times it's going to result in the opposition scoring rather than the team in possession. Whereas Ederson,
it makes sense. It's territorial, doesn't it?
Yeah. So even if you just boated it into row Z every time and throw-ins basically only go in 1% of the time, and if it's in the opposition half, even less than that. If you just did that every time you got a pass under pressure, you would be net positive because you wouldn't give anything away and do that. But Ederson goes even further because when he's under pressure, he can play a pass that then cuts over the opposition and makes it like sometimes 5% chance that City score, sometimes 10% chance that City score, whatever. And then you can see because he was under pressure, net, that's like 12% or 7% better off than if they had an average keeper trying to play those passes.
So how does that compare to other elite goalkeepers who play a similar style? Because I'm fascinated to that because the general, I've always said this and I've said basically nothing other than just using my eyes. I'm not an analyst, but I've always felt Ederson, there's lots of goalkeepers who are very good at passing, but I feel Ederson is genuinely unique and special. Does the stats show that or am I talking bullshit?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like the other goalkeepers, if I just got some up, I've just got some up now. So like Ramsdale and Mendy, who are both not bad at all with their feet, right? Are like plus 0.1. So like 0.1. A quarter.
4 times better.
So yes, exactly. Alisson's plus 0.2. So like Alisson's again better than Ramsdale and Mendy, but not Ederson level of doing under pressure. And I think
that's twice as good as that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of Alisson's worst area. Like under pressure, when he gets the ball at his feet, that's the area where sometimes he can. And I imagine you've watched so many Liverpool Man City games. Like you're going to know that's if you can get at Alisson. It's those little loose passes when he's under pressure that can go into midfield and you can counter that is sort of his area of weakness. But yeah, and then if you want to, we can look at De Gea and Lloris, who are at the other end of the spectrum, but they both play for big six.
De Gea for a laugh for me as a City fan, of course.
So like De Gea's minus 0.1. So actually under pressure, De Gea's not too bad. It's his general passing that's like -1. So as in a whole goal. That is the big issue. He's under pressure. He just boots it out of play, which, as I said before, isn't the end of the world. He's slightly negative, -0.1. But yeah, that's him. And then Lloris is. Let's have a look. Yeah, Lloris is similar. He's minus. Can't get it to show.
Go for it. No, don't worry about it.
Yeah. He's also -0.1. He's also -0.1. So he's the same as De Gea. So they're both the two keepers in the top 6 who are negative. The other ones are positive, but like you say, Ederson is far more positive than the rest.
And is that the same across the rest of the footballing world as far as your work? Obviously, you don't know every goalkeeper, but in general, like compared to other who for example excels, I don't know, in La Liga or something like, or the Bundesliga.
So in the Bundesliga, Jan Sommer and Neuer are both very good at playing under pressure at the back. They don't quite have what Ederson has, which is that pass. You know, when the strikers are coming and he goes in between them and through them, it would normally be Fernandinho, who just turns and then they're out. A lot of the goalkeepers, when they're under pressure, Rodri now this season, I guess, a lot of the goalkeepers, if they were pressed like that, would play it out to their fullback, and that's fine. You can get out, but obviously it's much easier if you beat 2 players than sort of just shifting it and letting those players then press the fullback. So he is sort of unique in that regard, definitely. I guess one thing that's worth saying is, if you notice those numbers, and this sort of roughly works out, in terms of what it's worth to a whole team over a whole season, shot stopping is about 60% of the sort of range. Usually, like that counts for about 60% of a goalkeeper's job. Shot prevention, so the crosses, the handling, the through balls, is about 30%, and distribution is only 10%. So that's why, while some of his prevention numbers and distribution numbers, Ederson's, were really good, the shot stopping is still sort of the major part of a goalkeeper's job, as you would imagine. Yeah. You can't get away with having big negatives, but it is safe to say, especially in the modern day, you can't be a poor preventer and distributor. As a quick example, David De Gea was plus 10 for stopping, but he was -6 in preventing and -1 in distributing. So overall, he was worse than Ederson last season. Like, loads of people probably would think, just looking at it naively and just basically looking at shot stopping, would think David De Gea's had a far better season last year than Ederson.
Yeah.
But actually, when you break it down, not coming for crosses and through balls and poor distribution actually means you face more shots, so you have more chance to save shots. So De Gea was sort of putting out his own fires, whereas at least Ederson was stopping fires, but then not saving them,
isn't it, as well? That's the meaning. Yeah. It doesn't translate to confidence for the team. It needs to be calm, composed, and winning games and so on.
Exactly.
It's fascinating, this, man. And I'm sorry that I've kept you so long, but I didn't expect it to be. But it's honestly, because I guess the thing for me is, like, I consider myself a City fan. It's pretty calm. I understand that people have bad seasons and so on, but there's been a lot of criticism towards Ederson. But it's really interesting to see, to me, that the stats do kind of back up how I guess I felt just by the general eye test, is that he did probably have a drop in performance, but overall it wasn't really a disaster. It overall really affects Manchester City, and overall his stats in all areas are a net positive in terms of like what he brings to Manchester City. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Like his form dropped off. He's not usually like a +3 goals goalkeeper. He's usually in the 6s and 7s. He dropped off a little bit, but still a net positive. One things to look out for would be his 1v1 form. Can he get that back? But other than that, it was a pretty traditional Ederson season, like good cross-claiming, good sweeping, good passing, pretty average shot stopping. The only thing that wasn't traditional Ederson was the slightly below average 1v1 saving.
And is it fair to say as well, given how Manchester City play and given what Guardiola demands, he's worth those red areas? Because of what else he brings. Is it that much of a difference?
I think it will be very interesting. Let's just see what happens with Ortega when he plays, because this is a guy who's coming in off the back of a great season. Is the mental demand going to mean his numbers just fall off a cliff? Because if it does, that shows how great Ederson is, because maybe that means if Ederson moved to the Bundesliga club that was getting relegated, he'd put up incredible numbers. It's one of the sort of hard things in goalkeeping, isn't it? It's you can get the numbers from a season, but because goalkeeping's so mental, it means it's hard to translate them. Like, you might have the technical and physical ability to pull off certain saves, certain cross claims, certain bits of sweeping, certain distributions. But if your head isn't all there to do that, if you feel under pressure, if you feel like you're going to lose your number 1 shirt, you can end up making silly decisions and not doing
that. Absolutely, John. This has been a masterclass in education. I thought this was going to be a 15-minute video. I didn't expect some of the conclusions, to be honest. So I think, is it fair to say Ederson, slightly poor season by his standards, but still above average as a goalkeeper, and the elite level, the essentially the bar for a distribution goalkeeper, and overall they've got an excellent keeper in Ortega. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah. It looks like a really smart signing. Like, the things Man City need: 1v1 stopper, distributor. He's got worries about his handling and cross claiming, but we'll see what happens, basically. And as always, keepers can improve things. Like, when I went on an Arsenal YouTube video, I was saying, like, Ramsdale had a lot of raw potential and he could improve. And it's just one of those things. Like, I saw a lot of positives in him when people were saying it's an awful signing, but at the same time, he did have weaknesses. So now it's interesting to see that keepers can improve and can fulfill their potential at places. So it'll be super interesting to see what Ortega can do.
John, thank you so much. Where can people find you, by the way, mate, on socials?
Cheers. Yeah, so on socials, at 𝐿HD Harrison1. is
Okay.
so yeah, it's just my name, John Harrison, on Twitter.
And goalkeeper.com, yeah.
And then go to goalkeeper.com. There's loads of articles and stuff going on that. We'll be having a big launch over the summer, covering the World Cup, doing loads of stuff about that. So yeah, check out goalkeeper.com as well, and their Twitter handle, which is just @goalkeeper.com.
John, this has been absolutely fascinating, mate. Honestly, I did not expect it, but it's really, really genuinely fascinating. I think this could be quite an eye-opener for the general narrative around certain people, certain players and so on. And I learned an awful lot there. So thank you so much, man. And everyone, of course, John's social links and all that kind of stuff will be in the description. Just do it right now. Right now, if you're watching, just click there right now. Go and give John a follow, because just informative, excellent, fascinating. John, thank you so much. And guys, thank you for watching this video. Go and give John a follow. Let me know down in the comments what you make of this video, and who actually managed to watch the hour. If you did watch the full hour, you say you're watching this right now and you're seeing this, so let me know if you watched the full hour down there below. And fair play to you if you did. John, thank you very much again, man. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for having me on.
And guys, like, comment, subscribe, all the usual stuff, and I will see you soon for a tongue-tied. See you soon for another video in a bit. Bye.